Welcome to the presentation on promoting children's success, building relationships, and creating supportive environments, brought to you in part by allceus.com. In this presentation, participants will learn how to describe the importance of building relationships with children, families, and colleagues. They'll be able to describe the relationship between children's social, emotional development and challenging behavior. They'll be able to describe how challenging behavior serves a function for children. They'll be able to describe the relationship between emotional variables, children's challenging behaviors, and social emotional development. Participants will identify strategies that can be used to build positive relationships with children, families, and colleagues, design environments, schedules, and routines, structure transitions, help children learn rules and routines, and plan activities that promote engagement. Participants will be able to use descriptive acknowledgement and encouragement to support children's positive social behaviors, and they will evaluate their work with children related to building relationships and the structure and design of their environment. So let's first examine our attitudes about challenging behaviors. What behaviors push your buttons? We all have buttons, and some of us can deal with certain behaviors that other people can't. So what are those behaviors that you just can't tolerate in your classroom, in a setting where you're doing counseling, in your home, etc.? How do these behaviors make you feel? Disrespected, out of control, irritable? What is it exactly that you are feeling? One of the ways that we will talk about to understand why children act or react the way they do is to look at how whatever happened made them feel. Because this was a button. They had a button pushed. How do they feel? And that will really shed a lot of light on why they're reacting the way they are. Now, these behaviors that push your buttons, how does this impact your relationship with a child and his or her family? Likewise, if you're thinking about your own children, how does this impact your relationship with your child and his or her relationship with you? Managing personal stress. The first thing we want to talk about is thought control. Upsetting thoughts that we have. Oh, this child is a monster. It's getting ridiculous and he will never change. Or I'm sick of putting out fires. I can't get anything done because every time I turn around, they're breaking something, fighting, etc. These are thoughts that we think that communicate to ourselves that we're powerless, there's nothing we can do, that we are failing in some way maybe, or that we're out of control of the situation. Other thoughts that we might have instead of or to replace the upsetting thoughts are, this child is testing to see where my limits are. My job is to stay calm and help him learn better ways to behave. Our job is to say, okay, every behavior has a reason. There's a function. It's a reward paradigm. If we ask ourselves, what is it that we're supposed to do in this situation? And what is the child trying to do? When we look at children as they're growing up, it's really kind of neat. I remember my little boy, when we were at my grandmother's house one time, he was about 18 months old, and he knew he wasn't supposed to touch the television. But he's a little scientist, and he had to try. So he walked over to the television, and he looked at me and he said, "No touch." I said, "That's right, no touch." And guess what he did? He touched it anyway. And then he promptly looked at me and he said, "Time out." And I said, "Yep, time out." He just wanted to make sure this was a new place and everything was new, everything was different. He was a little unsettled. He needed some structure. So he wanted to make sure that one of those rules that he knew very well was still enforced, and life sort of made sense to him. reminding yourself that you can handle this, you're in control. Children, as little scientists, know how to push your buttons. They do what they do for a reason, to get what they want, to get your attention. There are a lot of different reasons. So it's up to us to help them understand why they're doing what they're doing and maybe better ways of getting what they want. Again, my son was a very high-strung little boy. When he was little, when he was a toddler, when he was awake, he was wide open. And when he hit the proverbial wall, he would hit it and he would pass out. There was no in between. There was no just chilling out. He was either wide open or he was asleep. So what we learned was when he started making poor choices, that was usually him getting ready to hit that wall, and helping him identify that early on was really important. And he got to the point by the time he was 2 or a little older where he could identify that he needed a break. It wasn't necessarily nap time, but he needed a break. And he would go into his room and sit down on his bed and just kind of stare at a white wall for a little while until he was ready, and then he would get back up and come join the family again. But it took a couple of months of helping him identify, okay, this behavior's not okay, and you're not a bad child. What are you trying to communicate to me? You're trying to communicate that you need less input. You need a break. Most children will have those times where they're getting sleepy or sick or emotionally something's going on and they can't articulate it, and they want you to make it stop, or they want you to put some control or some structure into it. That's our job. Our job is to be scientists and figure out what it is, what buttons are being pushed in the child. Key social emotional skills children need as they enter school. They need confidence. They need to know that they're okay. And yeah, they might make mistakes, but that's okay too, as long as they learn from them. They need the capacity to develop good relationships with peers and adults, the ability to communicate, and as much as possible at that age, the ability to have empathy. Concentration and persistence on challenging tasks. As children grow up, when they're toddlers, if we encourage them, even when they start to get frustrated, to push on through or to at least try, if we give them the support that they need, then they will develop the ability and the willingness to push on through when something gets a little challenging. The ability to effectively communicate emotions. The ability to listen to instructions and be attentive, and the ability to solve social problems. One of my favorite ways of working with children to help them develop empathy and the ability to solve social problems, when there is a problem, asking the child, how would you feel if so-and-so did this to you? And then what do you think needs to happen? Children are a lot smarter than most people give them credit for. We just need to ask the right questions. Now, there is a caveat here. If you have a child who truly does have ADD, ADHD, fetal alcohol spectrum issues, autism, there are several diagnoses that may make it more difficult for a child to concentrate or to effectively communicate emotions or be attentive. If there's too much stimulation for some of these children, they may need to have a place, like my son did, where he could just go and stare at kind of a blank wall. Because being in the playroom where there's toys everywhere and there's noise and there's sounds and there's dogs and there's cats and there's people and all kinds of stuff, it was too much input. He couldn't filter it all out and he would get sort of sensory overload. Figure out what works for each child. Some children just need to go sit down and read a book quietly for a little while. Some children are overly stimulated by really bright colors or a lot of stuff that's on the walls. Some children are more bothered if there's a lot of chatter and a lot of auditory stimulation going on around them. Understanding what it is that's making it difficult for a child to concentrate and be attentive is going to be important. And also recognizing that a lot of young children do not have the ability to label exactly what's going on and exactly how it makes them feel. They act it out. It's our job to help them put words to that and say, okay, you're angry right now. I hear that. I see that. Let's talk about what you're angry about or what you're afraid about. When children don't have these skills, they tend to act out more. When they can't concentrate, they fidget and they look around because they can't focus. There are a lot of other things besides just sensory issues that may lead a child to be unable to communicate their emotions, be attentive, concentrate, or stick to it when something gets tough. Poor nutrition. If they're hungry, it's harder to concentrate. If there's a lot of drama going on at home, they may already be emotionally overwhelmed by the time they get to school. All of these things are bits of useful information that you may have to gather to try to understand that particular child. When children do not have these skills, they often exhibit challenging behaviors. Our job is to focus on teaching the skills to deal with life on life's terms. That means deal with challenging peers, deal with nice peers, deal with challenging emotions and when you're having a bad day, and how to appropriately interact with other people. If a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, we teach. Unfortunately, a lot of times when a child doesn't know how to behave, we punish. Instead of providing new behaviors or alternatives, we punish the behaviors that are there. So the child's trying to communicate something, and basically we're saying, shut up. Yeah, that's not a nice word, shut up. It's up to us to help them learn how to better deal with whatever it is that's bothering them or causing them to behave inappropriately. Maybe they just don't understand what's expected of them. Maybe they have so much else going on they can't pay attention. Again, be a scientist. Try to figure out what's the benefit, and that's what it really comes down to. What is the benefit of this behavior at this point in time to this child? What is he trying to communicate to me, albeit not effectively at the moment? Some basic assumptions. Challenging behavior usually has a message. I'm bored, I'm sad, you hurt my feelings, I need attention, I need structure, I'm scared. Children often use challenging behavior when they don't have the skills they need to engage in more appropriate interactions. The majority of children out there, 99.9999975% of children out there, are inherently good. They don't want to hurt other people. They don't want to be mean just for the sake of doing it. If they do hurt other people and they do behave inappropriately, they're trying to communicate something, and it's up to us and the parents to try to figure out what it is they're trying to communicate. Behavior that persists over time is usually working for the child. If Johnny throws a tantrum to get the Cocoa Puffs and Johnny gets the Cocoa Puffs, then guess what? When Johnny wants Cocoa Puffs again, he's going to throw a tantrum. If a child who is overloaded and emotionally just having sort of a sensory meltdown acts out and bites a peer, they generally get put in timeout or sent home, which is probably what they wanted. They needed a break. They needed some quiet time. They needed to feel safe again for some reason. We need to focus on teaching children what to do in place of the challenging behavior. Now, with young children, it's a little harder to say, okay, well, when you start to feel yourself getting angry, what are you going to do? It's very concrete in early child development for the child. If somebody makes you angry or hurts your feelings, this is what you can do. These are options that you have. As they get older, they'll be able to generalize and look at more abstract issues. But be very concrete. And just because you had a discussion with Tommy about not biting Susie when Susie does something that irritates him, don't expect that he's going to generalize that to Sammy and Jane and Bill. You may have to say, when any of your classmates make you angry, these are options that you have. And it's important not to bite anyone, not just don't bite Susie. Create an environment where every child feels good. Every child feels encouraged, every child feels important, and every child feels nurtured. That doesn't mean every child has to get away with everything all the time and we don't say no. That means we provide a structured, supportive environment that lets children learn from their mistakes and experience healthy involvement with others. Focus on teaching children what to do. Instead of letting a child come in and just kind of wing it and learn through the school of hard knocks what they're supposed to do and what not to do, teach them what to do from the get-go. If they know what they're supposed to do, they're less likely to make mistakes. Teach skills that children can use in place of challenging behaviors. Instead of hitting or biting or screaming or throwing something or whatever the challenging behavior is, what can you do? You can come tell the teacher. You can put your head down on the desk. That one usually doesn't work, but for some children it may. I worked with one child who was autistic who, when she would start to get overstimulated, just needed to tear paper. So we always kept paper handy. And when she felt stressed, she would go over and get the paper and she would shred it. And that helped her feel a little bit more in control of things in that particular situation where we couldn't necessarily attend to everything that she needed. Building positive relationships is the foundation of what children need. If they feel loved for who they are, and they feel like they're not judged even if they make a mistake, that's a good start. If they learn how they can communicate their feelings and understand that their feelings are worthwhile and important, that's even more important. Design supportive environments where there is somebody who can hear the child. Not every child is going to be heard right then and there. But explaining to the child, I need to finish working with Tommy right now, and then I will be over to see you, is important. And then thanking the child, thank you for being patient while I worked with Tommy. Now what can I do for you? Supportive environments follow through on promises. If you tell a child you're going to do something, you better darn well do it. I am just as guilty as anybody else of getting lost in my work or lost in something I'm doing and forgetting. And one of my children will come and ask me to do something and I'll say, sure, I'll be up there in just a minute. And 15 minutes later they come down and they're like, Mommy? And at that point, I need to apologize and say, you're right, I forgot. And that was not very nice and I'm sorry. And then I learn not to do that again. They recognize that, they do the same thing, and we talk about that sometimes. But these supportive environments say, you're going to make mistakes sometimes. Apologize for them and take the next step. Once children feel safe to express themselves and to try new things and all that wonderful stuff that they do as they're growing, then we need to start teaching social emotional strategies. We need to figure out how to teach them to identify what they're feeling. We need to teach them how to identify what their wants and needs are and how to cope with life on life's terms. From this, we can develop individualized intensive interventions to help children who are having trouble functioning in a classroom or in a family environment. Relationships help each child feel accepted in the group. It assists children in learning to communicate and get along with others. Practice makes perfect. Relationships encourage feelings of empathy and mutual respect among children and adults. It's hard to understand how your behavior is going to impact somebody else unless you've sort of experienced it or something like it before. If you've never touched a hot stove, it's hard to understand what burn means. Now, I'm not saying touch a hot stove. I'm saying we've touched other hot things before. So that gives us some sort of clue that it's going to hurt, or we've had other things hurt before. And if somebody says, if you touch that, it's going to hurt, most of us say, oh, okay, won't touch it then. But in order to understand some of these things, or understand how it feels when somebody hurts your feelings, children need to have either experienced it or seen it happen. Relationships provide a supportive environment in which children can learn and practice appropriate and acceptable behaviors as individuals and as a group. Sometimes what I'll do in my remedial groups, in my counseling groups with children who are really struggling in functioning in the classroom and or at home, and we're talking about younger children here, I'll play episodes of The Simpsons or snippets from The Simpsons or other shows that they may be familiar with. Super Y, Clifford the Big Red Dog, you name it. There are a lot of teaching moments within those things that children may watch that are age appropriate. You have to look sometimes, but you can find age appropriate material. And you can say, okay, how did it make Clifford feel when that happened? Or what's another way you could have handled this? Why is it important to build relationships with children? Because children learn and develop in the context of relationships that are responsive, consistent, and nurturing. Responsive, they give praise when you do good things. They give constructive feedback when you make mistakes. Consistent, in that the same behavior receives the same treatment every time. And nurturing, remembering that the child is not the behavior. I'll say that again. The child is not the behavior. We don't like the behavior. We like the child. And we can help the child change the behavior. Children with the most challenging behaviors need positive relationships, yet their behaviors often prevent them from benefiting from those relationships. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Their behaviors are a last-ditch effort to try to get somebody to help them. It's a great big SOS, yet that SOS sign generally is pushing other people's buttons. If you can reframe it with those less upsetting thoughts and say, okay, what is it this child needs right now? And it may change moment to moment, day to day. But what is it this child needs right now, or what can I provide? With my son, when he was in public school, he would come home at the end of the day and lose his ever-loving mind. I mean, he would bounce off the walls. Now, when he got into school, he was past that point of being wide open or asleep. However, when he would come home, You would have thought that they had him chained to a chair for 6 hours with the amount of energy he had, and he'd get loud and he would get oppositional and all this other stuff. And it took me a little while and talking to other parents to finally understand that he had to behave all day long. And he built up so much, tension and all kinds of stuff from all those impulses he had to suppress, that when he got home, he just kind of had to let his proverbial hair down. So, okay, we learned how to channel that in ways that were more appropriate. When he would get home, instead of me telling him he needed to, go play quietly while I made dinner or something, we would spend the first 30 minutes or an hour playing, doing something. We would take the dog out for a walk. We would go to the park on the way home. We would do something where he could get all that physical energy out, because his brain had been going all day long, but his body hadn't. Adults' time and attention are very important, not only for corrective attention, but also positive feedback. We forget the good jobs. We forget to reward positive feedback. We take that for granted, to reward that positive behaviors are going to happen. So children often act out because guess what? Negative attention is better than no attention. And if you don't give me any attention when I do the right thing, then I darn sure am going to get attention if I do the wrong thing. Parents are critical partners in building children's social emotional competence. Now, I don't mean critical in criticizing. I mean they're vital in building children's social and emotional competence. It's vital to have the parents supporting the child because they're with the child. They can give you great information about what this child does right before they get sick or right before they have a meltdown. One of my girlfriends had a little boy, and whenever he would get, as she euphemistically called it, disorganized, it was usually 24 to 48 hours before he would get sick. And you could pretty much set your clock by it. I don't know that it happened all the time, but every time I was around, it happened. And his disorganization would be not being able to focus on anything, starting to watch a TV show and then wandering off and doing something else, not following through, not remembering when his mom asked him to do stuff, which was not characteristic for this child. But she was very intuitive and recognized that that was a prelude to him getting sick. And she believed it was his body sort of taking all the energy that he used to focus and concentrate to try to fight off whatever illness it was. But parents know their kids, hopefully. And if not, they need to get to know their kids. From the perspective, and this is one of the things I work on with parents a lot, again, remembering that the child only does things that have a benefit, so they're trying to get something from this behavior. Annoying you is probably not it. Maybe they're trying to get your attention. Maybe they're trying to get structure. Maybe they're trying to get comfort. Maybe they're trying to whatever. It's up to the parent to learn the child's patterns and help the child start recognizing their own patterns. Building positive relationships with children involve empathy. Things that may not be big deals to us may be big deals to kids. So the ability to empathize with them and go, yeah, that was really awful. How did that affect you when that happened? Is important. Play. One of the things that I learned early on from one of my son's preschool teachers was that children are intuitive. And yes, they love to play. And I kind of get too serious sometimes. And she outed me one time and she said, yeah, he doesn't want to play with you because you're boring. I said, oh, okay. But she had a point. I didn't know how to play. And there are some things to this day I don't like to play. I was never good at playing cars with him. But we had the most wonderful time playing hide and go seek. or drawing together or doing Legos. Those things I can do. Happy grams. Give children positive notes, thank yous, for no apparent reason, just because you are. Send positive notes home, not just critical notes. My son's teacher this semester is so different than any other teacher he's had because every assignment that he submits, she sends back just, well, not every assignment, but the majority of assignments, he's doing well in the class, come back with very glowing comments. And there's always positive feedback within it. And if there is something that needs to be corrected, she kind of does it with that correction sandwich. And she says, this part was really, really awesome. Now I'm a little confused, or can you help me understand better what happened here? So he gets the positive feedback on the stuff that he did well. And he doesn't learn that, oh, I made one mistake, so I failed the whole assignment. Home visits are important. Like I said, the parents know the children better than anybody else, and sometimes better than the children know themselves. So it's important to understand what's going on at home. If you are a teacher, that may not be practical to do home visits, but parent-teacher conferences are important. Time and attention. Don't just give all the time to the 3 or 4 children who are doing the wrong thing in class, or the 2 or 3 children that you like better in the class. And yes, we have favorites. It happens. There are some children, we have transference reactions that are just so helpful, whatever the reason. There are some children we like better, but we need to remember to distribute as equally as possible our time and attention. And share. Share your feelings. Share your ideas. Share your time. Share who you are. It doesn't mean you have to share your stuff. That's usually not appropriate in a classroom. But do make sure that children understand how to share with one another and how to take turns. Building relationships can start with making sure that the child feels like they're a part of something greater. In this picture, you see several different pictures above where a child takes their nap that have pictures of them with the other children in the classroom and with the teacher, so they feel like it's a group. That's my kindergarten class, or that's my whatever. So how do you build these positive relationships with children, families, and colleagues? Brainstorm a list of things you could do to build or strengthen relationships with the children in your classroom or on your caseload, their families, and other colleagues who interact with the children who are on your team. Communication is huge. Being open-minded is huge. Respecting people for what they do is huge. You know all that stuff you learned in kindergarten? Share with the large group. Make sure you let them know what you're seeing and what's going on. Take input, because guess what? You're probably not right 100% of the time. I know I'm not. So what may appear as X to me may actually be W. And if you're sharing with your team, they may be able to say, oh, you know, that makes a lot of sense because he went on vacation for 2 weeks and he just got back, and, you know, it's hard for him to get back into the swing of things after being on vacation. Identify 2 to 3 things you're going to do to build stronger relationships with the children that you work with, their families, and your colleagues. Now remember, it can be as simple as sending positive notes home. It doesn't have to be a dissertation. It can be one sentence. It can be a sticky note. It can be a stamp with a smiley face and maybe something handwritten. Handwritten goes a lot further than just smiley faces and stickers. It doesn't have to be a dissertation. Communicate with families. If a child was having difficulty, communicate with them when it starts getting better to let them know that things are getting better and how awesome it is. Greet every child at the door by name. Post every child's work around the room. Now, every piece of work that every child does. That's not going to happen. But make sure every child is represented in your classroom. Along with that, if you have children from different cultures, which you probably do, ask them to tell you certain things that may be representative of their family or their culture. Around the holidays, it's very important to remember and recognize children of different faiths and different cultures and how they celebrate what's the holiday. Call a child's parent in front of them to say what a great day she's having or send home positive notes. After a difficult day, tell a child, I'm sorry we had a tough day today. I know tomorrow's going to be better. Then the child won't dread going back the next day going, oh, I wonder if Miss Susie's still mad at me. Give high fives and thumbs up for accomplishing tasks. Again, it doesn't have to be tangible rewards. A smile, a high five, a great job goes a long way. Write on a t-shirt all the special things about a child and let him or her wear it. When my son was in kindergarten, the teacher would select a leader of the week, whoever had the best behavior the previous week, and it was a whole complicated system, but they got to wear around a vest, and for that week they got to be the leader. And people had a chance every week to do better and to be the leader, and they would just beam when they got to wear this vest around. Acknowledge children's efforts. Find out what a child's favorite book is and read it to him or her. Not every child likes Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. That's one of my favorite books. I love and Skippy John Jones. Some children have no interest in that book. Ask them what their favorite book is. Give compliments liberally. When you play with children, follow their lead. Not always. Sometimes you have to enforce sticking to rules once they're set. But when you can follow their lead, try to, instead of always having to be in control of the situation. And let children make all about me books that can be shared at dinner or at family time. Designing supportive environments. Balance activities. Children need active and quiet time. They need group, family, and individual time. And they need parent or teacher-directed as well as child-directed activities. If we are always telling them what to do, that communicates to them that we don't trust them to use their own judgment. It also communicates to them that they don't have to think. They will always be told what to do. Teach children the schedule. Establish a routine and follow it consistently. Most children do well with at least a moderate routine. And when changes are necessary, prepare them ahead of time. With younger children, you can teach with visual prompts. You can put up a calendar Monday through Friday, and if you have a particular class, like you go to art every Wednesday, you can put a specific color or picture there. You can have a timeline on the wall so children can visually see when it's time to go to recess. Use visual prompts also to help them know what's expected. If you want them to clean up their area, what does that mean? What does it look like? So take pictures of maybe the shelf that has all the blocks in it when it's clean and post it above the shelf so they can see what it's supposed to look like when they're finished cleaning up. Visual object schedules may be something like in this image where the children see that first there's diaper changing time, then they need to wash their hands, eat breakfast, and then they have music. You can use real objects or you can use pictures, but you try to use pictures of real objects if you're using pictures because kids don't always understand what drawings are. when they see them, they may be like, oh, what's that? Using visual schedules for activities. An example, you say it's time for bed, and your son roams away. When you try to guide him to his room, he drops to the ground and will not budge. How can you use your visual schedule to teach? Well, at that point, you can take him back over to the visual schedule and you say, okay, you went to school and you came home and you ate dinner and you went to soccer and then you came home and you took your bath and you read your story. And what's this last picture here? Ah, it's go to bed. If he sees everything, it helps him internalize what's going on. Now again, remember that there may be another reason he's hurling himself on the floor. He could be overtired. He could have had a nightmare the night before and not want to go to bed. Don't just assume that he's, quote, forgotten the schedule. He may also just be testing limits to see if he throws a hissy, if he doesn't have to go to bed right away, and he can get something else put in there before bedtime. Be consistent. Be loving, be nurturing, but consistent. A child goes to play with her favorite train. When you go over to her and tell her it's time for snacks, she starts screaming and throwing train pieces. How can you use your visual schedule to teach? Again, have the child go over to the visual schedule and read it to you. Tell you what happens here, here, and here. You can also help her put words to her feelings. Like she's frustrated that it's time for snack already because she was having so much fun playing with the trains. So what can you do about it? Well, maybe this means that tomorrow she'll get to play with them again. Whatever it is, you don't want to reward the negative behavior by saying, okay, fine, just play with the trains and you can skip snack. That teaches her that whenever she wants to skip snack and play with the train, she just has to throw a hissy. Probably not what you want to teach. So again, be consistent. Explain to the child why this has to happen. It's time for snack. We need to do this now. And make sure not to reward negative behaviors. Plan for transitions. Now, we don't want to transition every 20 minutes. It's just going to get exhausting for kids. So you want to minimize the number of transitions that they have during the day and the length of time they spend waiting with nothing proactive to do. One of the things we do in transitions between classrooms sometimes is sing a song. Everybody lines up single file, and while we're waiting, we have a lineup song that we sing while everybody gets in line. And they do this little choo-choo motion with their arms. So the kids that are getting behind them start doing the choo-choo motion. And then there's less touching and getting in each other's space, etc. That's also an auditory cue that it's time to get ready to go. The kids like the song, so they enjoy getting in line so they can do the little choo-choo dance. Prepare children for transitions by providing a warning. We're leaving the playground in 5 minutes. Or maybe you flash the lights if you're in a classroom, or ring a bell. Give them time to gather their thoughts and their things before it's transition time. Teach children that the expectations related to the transitions. For example, the choo-choo song stops as soon as we get out into the hallway because we don't want to disrupt other classes. We also don't put our hands on other people. We're our own little trains. No touching anybody else's caboose. And use individualized supports and cues. Some children will get distracted, and it will be important to be able to tap them on the shoulder or clear your throat or do something that's somewhat insignificant to all the other children, that child goes, oh, yeah, okay, back on task. Transition with visual and a timer. In this example, there's a young child who has a timer and is on the computer. We're assuming this is Brendan. And when the timer goes off, then it's not Brendan's turn anymore, and it becomes somebody else's turn. Timers are amazing, especially with video games and TV and play outside and things that are not super structured. Timers give kids an auditory cue so they can learn to sort of develop a concept of time. Transitions with visual choice. When the children go to centers, in this particular example, they can choose to do one of 8 different things. So they get to choose from that list which center they're going to go to. When you ask a child, or when you ask a grown-up, for goodness sake, where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. Where do you want to go? We're grown-ups. We should be able to pick from a list of choices. But it doesn't automatically pop into our brain. Children are the same way. What center do you want to go to? If you give them visual cues, it may trigger them to go, oh, I want to go to the building section, or I want to go to the cooking section. You can also give them a time limit on how long they've got. If you have a 5-minute transition or 3-minute transition between centers, set the timer so it has like a 1-minute countdown so children know they've got to make a decision. By the way, I do like those timers that have basically 2 timers. You can set it for 10 minutes, and then the last 30 seconds or a minute, it beeps at you every second to remind you that, okay, it's time, it's time, it's time, it's time, time's up. You can do an activity analysis using clip art or pictures. An activity analysis basically breaks down a complicated activity step by step. In here, it's showing how to wash hands. First, you get them wet. And don't forget the soap. Then you need to wash your hands. Then what do you do after you wash your hands? You dry your hands. Then you throw the paper away. Now, you could also add in there, make sure to get your hands lathered. So have pictures of bubbles and soap. You can also have in there making sure to turn off the water. But this is a good activity analysis to help children remember everything they're supposed to do. An individual schedule shows a child what they do first and then what happens. Maybe they really, really like small group. But first, they need to sing and sit through story time. So this helps the child who has difficulty waiting because there's something they really, really want to get to, and it prompts them what they have to do first. Family activities. When planning the activity, you want to consider the length. Be clear about the purpose and goals of the activity, and use family circle time to teach new things. If you have children of differing ages, maybe you have a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old, the 3-year-old's going to get tuckered out a whole lot faster than the 10-year-old probably, and they'll have different interests and different ideas about what's fun. So consider the length of time that you're going to be gone or going to be engaged in an activity and make sure it's appropriate for everybody involved. Be clear about the purpose and goals. If you're doing something that the 3-year-old wants to do, what's the 10-year-old supposed to get out of it? Use family circle time to teach new things. And this can be, maybe you're getting ready to go to a fancy restaurant, or you're getting ready to go to a new church, or you're getting ready to go to grandma's for the first time, or take a ride on an airplane. Use family circle time to teach expected behaviors so it's not so stressful for the child when they get in the situation. During the activity, provide opportunities for all children to be actively involved. Assign jobs to children. Make sure to vary your speech and intonation patterns. Have children lead activities and pay attention to their behaviors. If their behaviors start to deteriorate, it may indicate a lack of understanding or a lack of interest, or that they're just done. Family activities allow children to build skills and receive individualized attention from the parents. Planning and implementing family activities helps you be clear about the goal, helps you use peers as models or brothers and sisters, ensures participation by all children. It's important that all the children get to put in their own 2 cents so everybody has fun, and you can provide feedback throughout. Again, on those activities where maybe you're taking your 3-year-old to the park and your 10-year-old has outgrown the park. Maybe he or she can bring a book, and you explain to him that you all are going on a family outing, so sister can play and he can read his book and maybe help you out, or whatever the expectations are. So he knows what's expected of him and what he can sort of get away with. It's also good to put a time limit on it ahead of time, especially if one or more members is not really looking forward to it. Indicate we're going to go to the park for an hour, or however long it is, or we're going to grandma's for 3 days. That will help children wrap their mind around how long they've got to behave or endure something they don't want to do, or whatever it is. Make sure you have the children's attention before you give the directions. If they're running around packing their suitcases and getting food and doing this, that, and the other, and you're hollering commands to them, most likely they're not hearing you. Get them in front of you, get their eyes. Minimize the number of directions given verbally to children. Even if you have their full attention, if you give them more than 3 directives, they're probably not going to remember them. I like writing things down, and then my children can carry the list around with them, and they have a checklist of, okay, I fed the dog, I packed my suitcase, I brushed my hair, I brushed my teeth. That doesn't work for all kids, so you need to individualize how the directions are given and make sure they're clear. Going back to the example of cleaning up your area. Well, clean to one child may be very different than what clean is to you or to another child. So providing clear instructions on what's expected is going to be important. Give positive directions. Provide positive alternatives for behaviors. Try not to start out, preferably don't start out, by threatening. You guys need to get this room cleaned up in the next 5 minutes or we're not going to have recess. Is not a way to start. Have it be a contest. Have it be something exciting. Have it be a challenge. Let's see how fast we can get this room cleaned up so we have extra time at recess. Give children the opportunity to respond to a direction. Say they don't understand, or even they don't agree, maybe. That gives you a chance to open a dialogue and tell them either why it has to be that way, or hear their side out. When appropriate, give the child choices and options for following directions. You can do A or you can do B. Follow through with positive acknowledgement of children's behavior. So when they actually do it, whatever it is, commend them for it, even if it's not exactly how you would have done it. Did they do their best and did they try? Positive encouragement. Constructive feedback can always be given, but it's vital that you also include positive feedback. In general, keep it simple. If you have 20 rules, your 5-year-old's not going to remember them all. Keep it simple. Involve the children in developing the rules and post them visually. If your children are too young to read, try to put up pictures when you can. Teach the rules systematically and reinforce the rules consistently. Have children help generate the rules Name the rule and have the child demonstrate it so they can show you that they understand what you mean. Name the rule and have the children identify the visuals that might go on a poster. So what kind of a picture could we put that would remind you to change the cat box? Have children decorate their own rules poster. So it's a work of art that is put on the refrigerator or wherever you have it put. Circle time rules. Here's an example of using pictures to communicate rules of what's expected at circle time. Rules should address noise level, movement, like no running, or you need to stay in your seat, or please don't use the furniture like it's gymnastics equipment. Interactions with property, interactions with adults, and interactions with peers and parents. Now, these should be very general. Treat others as you want to be treated. Take care of other people's stuff and respect other people's things. These are hard for kids to wrap their heads around initially. They're going to have a few slip-ups because respect other people's things is a pretty vague term. However, they will learn through experience what that means, and they'll be able to say, oh, okay, yeah, I wasn't very respectful, was I? No, you weren't. So what are we going to do about it? Develop a list of 3 to 5 rules you use or would use in a home. Discuss these rules with others and brainstorm fun and creative ways for teaching these rules. So if you're a child therapist and you're going and doing in-home counseling, what rules would you expect to see enforced in a household? And what are some fun and creative ways for teaching the rules to the kids so it's not like you are sitting there with smacking a ruler on your hand going, you will sit at the table. You will not backtalk your mother. You will do whatever. Kids don't get that. They may hear it and they may respond out of fear, but they're not really internalizing it. Make a rules bingo game or a rules Jeopardy game. Make a big book about rules or play rules charades. Give children attention when they're engaging in appropriate behaviors. And remember to monitor your behavior to ensure that you're responding and spending more time using descriptive language and less time giving directions and correcting inappropriate behavior. Because what do we know? If kids are behaving appropriately, they're not behaving inappropriately. They can't do it both things at the same time. So if you reward the positive behavior, they're probably going to do that more than the negative behavior, unless they have a need that's not being met. One example of a positive attention activity would be to count the number of positive comments the parent makes and positive nonverbals. Keep a journal of these during each home visit or each parent-teacher conference to understand, if you're working in a clinical setting with the family, and to help the parent understand what the child is seeing. Because a lot of times parents think that they give a whole lot more positive feedback than they really do. Discuss with the parent what types of comments and nonverbal behaviors he or she exhibited. If you saw a lot of scolding, judgmental, negative, shutting down behaviors, it's important to communicate what those are. Because again, a lot of people don't recognize their own nonverbals. Generate some ideas to help adults remain focused on the positive throughout the day. We have a rule that for every time you have a negative thought about something or someone, you need to try to have a more constructive or positive thought that tries to balance it out and keeps people or helps keep people from dwelling on the negative behaviors. Encourage participants to include some of these ideas on their action planning form. This depending on where you're at. It may be called your treatment plan, your relapse prevention plan, your behavior modification plan, whatever you're calling it. Include some of these ideas about how parents are going to monitor their own nonverbals and verbals and increase the positive ones. Use positive feedback that is contingent on appropriate behavior. These behaviors need to be descriptive. If Johnny doesn't know what's going to get him praise, then he's not going to know what to do, and he's just going to start trying things until he gets some sort of a reaction. So help Johnny know what's expected. Convey positive feedback with enthusiasm, not great job, yeah, good job, but wow, that's really awesome. You hear the difference? And feedback should be contingent on the effort. If your child puts his dish in the dishwasher, that deserves a good job, thanks a lot. Which is much different than if they get an A on a book report. Wow, awesome job. Because the effort was different. It took 2 seconds to put the dish in the dishwasher. It took a lot more than 2 seconds to write a good book report. Remember to use nonverbal forms of positive feedback and encouragement. Smile, nod your head, give them a hug, pat them on the back, whatever's appropriate given the circumstance and the setting. Individualize use of positive feedback and encouragement based on the children's needs and preferences. Not all children like to be hugged. And as they get older, they really don't like it sometimes. So even if you would like somebody to give you a hug, it doesn't mean everybody wants to be hugged. Not everybody wants to be touched. For some people, a smile is enough. Some people want a high five. Try to figure out what it is that that child finds most rewarding. And encourage other adults and peers to use positive feedback and encouragement with the child. So it's not just you. It's all the teachers in the school. It's everybody in the family, not just mom and dad, but also brothers and sisters. Increasing positive behaviors. Identify 3 to 5 behaviors you would like to see increase in your setting. And then think about what changes you might be able to make in your use of positive feedback and encouragement in order to increase the behaviors you just identified. So what can you do in order to encourage it? If children are not used to putting their clothes in the hamper, they're not going to think about it, so it won't get done. But if you want them to do it, maybe you can put up a visual cue. Maybe you can give an auditory cue. There are a lot of different things that you can do to encourage positive behaviors. Try to reward good behaviors before you start punishing bad ones. So try to make it worth the effort to do something instead of having a child only doing something in order to avoid punishment. Here's a sample certificate you can give to kids if they have a really awesome day or they do something really awesome. Kids love certificates and awards and vests. So what are the major messages here? The first and most important thing that we can do is to build positive relationships with every child. We need to focus on prevention of negative behaviors and teaching appropriate skills. So create an environment that is appropriate for the children, that is conducive to the child, and teach appropriate skills. If you take a child into a china shop, that's not an appropriate environment. You're going to be on edge. They're going to be on edge. They're probably going to break something because it looks pretty. Putting a child in a room with a bunch of Legos, much more appropriate. So make sure wherever you're trying to set the situation up that there's not a lot of don'ts. Try to make sure that it's an environment that you're not going to be saying, don't touch that, don't do that, don't dap, 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 all the time. Then you start to sound like Charlie Brown's teacher to the child, and it's wah, 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 Sammy, wah, 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 wah. And then nothing happens. There are no quick fixes to challenging behavior. Once a child has learned that behavior X produces result Y, they're going to keep doing that for a little while until they realize that either A, there's a better way that works just as well, or they realize that X is not getting them Y anymore. And that doesn't happen overnight. Developing these skills requires a comprehensive approach that includes building relationships, evaluating our own homes and behaviors, evaluating the environment that the children are in and our behaviors, and teaching. Children aren't born knowing how to do all this stuff. We have to teach it.